all the same. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Monday, March 16th, West Fargo City Commission meeting. This evening, we have a guest in the gallery, Mr. Preston Kemmer and his father. Preston is a Boy Scout, and this evening, I'm going to ask him to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Preston?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you, Preston. He's from Troop 637 in Moorhead. Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. I have one item to add to the agenda to be on the regular agenda, and that is that this afternoon, through the agreement of my fellow commissioners, West Fargo entered into an emergency declaration, and that is an actionable item. So that will be 1A. That'll be the first item that we take place this evening. And I have the emergency declaration here if anybody would like to see what it says. Moving the order of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda with the amendment of 1A and the regular agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the March 2nd, 2020. They have been distributed. They are online.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Horsted seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the March 2nd, 2020 meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is to approve the building permits.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as distributed. It is online, and the commissioners have copies of them. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is the consent agenda. There is items A through K. Is there any discussion on this?
I'll make a motion to approve the.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as distributed, items A through K. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item 1A. Through consensus of my fellow commissioners, we have agreed to issue an emergency declaration with regard to the coronavirus. And today, the Cass County Commission President, the Mayor of Fargo, the Mayor of Moorhead, and myself all met at the Cass County Commission, and we all signed joint emergency declarations with regard to dealing with the virus. Commissioners, this is an actionable item that we should actually take a vote on it. Again, I thank you for your consensus 2 weeks ago, but your thoughts, please.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the emergency declaration issued by the city of West Fargo with regard to the coronavirus. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. For the record, we do have this up here, and anyone is welcome to read it. I wasn't going to take the time to read it today. Next order of business is item number 1. It is to review the Renaissance Zone application for Quality Boneless Beef Company Incorporated. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you. This is a Renaissance Zone project application for the renovation and expansion of Quality Meats Boneless Beef Co. Inc. building located at 700 Center Street, West Fargo. Recently, the building suffered a partial roof collapse, and the applicants would like to tear down the remaining part of the roof and rebuild that portion of the building, along with adding a new 22,000 square foot addition. The applicants also have the building located on Main Avenue and are planning on selling that property and moving all operations to the 700 Center Street location. The applicants expect the new addition will also give them capacity to hire 5 to 10 new employees. At their January 4th, 2020 meeting, the Economic Development Advisory Committee voted to recommend their approval of the application in an 8-2 to 1 vote. Out of the 2 members in opposition, one voiced concerns about the amount of total state income tax benefit that would be received, and the other member thought that the applicant should only receive partial incentives since they are relocating from a property that is already within city limits. The one abstention was due to that particular member's business relationships with the applicant. The applicant is here tonight, and should you have any questions, I am available as well as them.
Commissioners? The Renaissance Zone application was in your packets for your review. Are there any questions of Mr. Peterson?
I'll make the motion to approve. Second.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the Renaissance Zone application for Quality Boneless Beef. Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? The points that the 2 Economic Development Advisory Committee made with regard to their concern was the amount of sales tax?
The amount of state income tax.
State income tax,
Yep,
okay.
was what one of the members voiced concerns about, and the other one just voiced concerns on both income and property tax as well.
With regard to the comment about relocating to their second site in the city of West Fargo, is there any other, has there been history of which that has been one of the arguments about whether or not we give them full credit?
Not that I'm aware of.
Commissioner Simmons or Commissioner Thorstead, you're the seniors here. You recall anything like
I
that?
don't recall that we've ever put that into play.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Being none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the approval of the Renaissance Zone application for Quality Boneless Beef Company, Inc., signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Item number 2 is review the Renaissance Zone applications for the Rested Industrial Park. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you. So similar to the projects that you approved at the last City Commission meeting, these 3 Renaissance Zone project applications are for lease-only projects within the Rustad Industrial Park. If approved by both the City Commission and the State of North Dakota Department of Commerce, these businesses would receive state income tax benefits for a 5-year period. At their January 4th, 2020 meeting, the Economic Development Advisory Committee unanimously voted to recommend their approval of the 3 applications. All 3 applications will need to be voted on separately tonight, and the applicants are here should you have any questions for them.
Mr. Peterson, can you tell me how many employees each of these 3 companies are bringing to West Fargo?
I can. Off the top of my head here, I don't have that number for you, but I can look in the packets here. All 3 of the applicants have submitted business incentive agreements, drafts of business incentive agreements to us. And within that documentation here, it looks like one of them has 5 full-time employees. The other one, I believe, has 3 full-time employees. One has 14. And then the other one has 5. So 5, 5, and 14.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I want it read into the record for the purpose of the public. Any further discussion, gentlemen? Renaissance Zone applications for Rested Industrial Park for RDA Inc., CROG Transport, and F6 Transport. And we will be taking, each of them are an actionable item individually.
I'll make a motion to approve for RDA Inc.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve RDA Inc. for a Renaissance Zone application as distributed to us. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is item B, CROG Transport.
I'll make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Renaissance Zone application for the Rested Industrial Park, CROG Transport LLC. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the Renaissance Zone application for F6 Transport LLC.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Renaissance Zone application at the Rested Industrial Park for F6 Transport LLC. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business on the regular agenda is item number 3. It's to review the enterprise grant application for Hollywood Beauty Suites.
Thank you. The applicant has submitted an application for a $47,066 enterprise grant. This grant will be used by the applicant to assist with fit-up costs to provide for a space for 5 private suites for individual licensed beauty professionals. The applicant has submitted a business plan, letter from Belt Bank confirming she has adequate funds to cover construction, as well as letters of intent from 2 beauty professionals who will lease space from her. The applicant's lease with Epic is contingent on receiving the grant. The applicant and a representative from Epic, as well as myself, are here tonight to answer any questions you might have. I would also like to make a note here that how the enterprise grant works is that after initial construction costs are done, the applicant would then submit receipts to the city of West Fargo for reimbursement. And then Jim Larson, the city's finance director, would confirm those receipts before issuing the reimbursement to the applicant.
Are there many questions for Mr. Peterson? Michael?
In past enterprise grants we've had, do they have to stay in business for 5 years in order to receive the full benefit of the grant? Is that
Yes,
still the
that is- yep.
parameters?
This is just the second grant application we received.
Correct. The first was Thunder Coffee, which I believe was last summer.
And are there any protocols or policy with regard to a business relocating and still being being able to apply for this grant?
I am not aware of any policies like that the city has.
This is an existing West Fargo business, is that not correct?
No, this is Fargo business moving it to West Fargo.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Yes, sir. Please, Commissioner Jurdevig moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the enterprise grant application for Hollywood Beauty Suites. Is there any further discussion? Being none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Item number 4 is the second reading of a zoning ordinance amendment to section 4-460. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. If you recall, first reading, Not a lot of major issues with this proposed ordinance amendment. It was primarily a cleanup to add the entertainment mixed-use district and downtown mixed-use district into the sign code. There was some question regarding projecting signs. As I had stated at that meeting, we simply copied the language from the previous Cheyenne Street Overlay District and have used encroachment agreements, which are reviewed and approved by the City Commission. I would just say, based on some of what happened over the last week, we didn't put a lot of time into adding any language into that, trusting that the encroachment agreement would be sufficient. I discussed at the last meeting potentially having height limitations or encroachment limitations, and I'd offer tonight that if you would like to continue a discussion and do further research into if we should have very clear specifications in this portion of the sign code, that we do that and hold off on the second reading. If you're comfortable with the encroachment agreement that is approved by the City Commission being sufficient, then I encourage you to have the second reading held tonight. With that, I'm available for any questions.
So then you would have the authorization, Mr. Solberg, of reviewing them on an on-case basis as to what the protrusion might be from the face of the building, or?
Actually, we would lay that out, which we have done in our previous encroachment agreements, as to be approved by the City Commission. So that's, our encroachment agreement is required to be approved by the City Commission for each building that would have an encroachment of a sign. So on Cheyenne Plaza, we only reviewed the VFW sign, which protrudes. On Pioneer Place, we reviewed it as a building as a whole and mimicked the language within that Cheyenne district. So I think we talked about, Your Honor, potentially setting up precedent in those encroachment agreements. And the way it's currently set up is case by case. If we do it written in a stone, then case by case will no longer exist. It'll be written in
As long as you review them case by case, I'm fine.
Yeah,
with
the
that.
commission would, yeah.
Mr. Thorstad, are you recusing yourself on this item? Okay. For the public's knowledge, Mr. Thorstad and I will both be recusing ourselves because of association with the sign industry. So, any questions for Mr. Solberg?
I'd also entertain, if you do have concerns about that encroachment agreement, our city attorney assisted on those past encroachment agreements, and he'd probably be able to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Simmons moves to approve the second reading of zoning ordinance amendments to section 4-460. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of zoning ordinance amendment to section 4-460. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Number 5 is the first reading of ordinance number 1155. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Before you have ordinance 1155. It accomplishes a number of cleanups and adds a number of items. The first is just a cleanup from the nuisance side, adding an invasive species or insects and deleting as determined by the Urban Forestry Committee, just making it easier to prosecute it. With regards to possession of marijuana, this was an ordinance cleanup calling out 2 sections because there's 2 different penalties, so it was just a clarification. There's an addition to Chapter 12 to reflect the recent federal legislation that moved the sale of tobacco from 18 to 21. There was a real question of that action was taken on at the federal level, and the states and local governments really weren't aware that it was going to happen, and so now everybody's taking action to bring our local ordinances and the state law up to age 21. So that's really just moving it from 18 to 21 to be consistent with federal law. And then we, on the next section, in section 13, regarding authorized emergency vehicles, instead of the Director of Parks and Recreation Department, we cleaned it up to have West Fargo Park District. And then a clarification that vehicles that regarding can't be driven on the sidewalk, It doesn't apply to any government agency or designee of such government agency. You'll recall about a year ago, we had a complaint about Cass County Vector four-wheeler driving down the sidewalk. This is just a cleanup to make it clear that those are acceptable to drive down the sidewalk when they're blowing or spraying for mosquitoes. And then just bringing up to current status the child restraint devices, along with clarifying the restrictions on who is authorized to post signs for restricted turning movements, turning markers, and then adding in a section for distracted driving, which really is relating to the use of cell phones, essentially. Not if you're driving distracted with a cell phone, it's an offense. Can certainly answer any questions. It is a first reading. It largely impacts the type of items that are prosecuted in the municipal court. And so this is why we tried to do it in one ordinance, because it's just a cleanup ordinance for the municipal prosecutions.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there any questions for Mr. Shockley? It's your pleasure.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Simmons, seconded by Commissioner Jurdevig to approve the first reading of ordinance number 1155 as presented by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Being none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 6, the resolution providing for partial redemption of the temporary refunding improvement bonds of 2018. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Back in 2018, the city had issued approximately $45 million of temporary financing for the Cheyenne Street project to fund the local share. Those bonds will be refunded later this year when we do a permanent or definitive refunding improvement bond. However, there's a portion of it that the city can call early, and the city is desiring to do that to save some interest on it. And so we're calling or prepaying $8,335,000. And so we just need commission approval to do it. Jim from the finance director can certainly answer any financial questions, but it's consistent with the bond documents and consistent with our finance plan for the project.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Commissioners, are there any questions of Mr. Shockley or Mr. Larson, Director of Finance?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say anytime I think we can redeem these is excellent for our city and our taxpayers. So I think it's great that we can do this, Jim.
Very positive. Very positive.
I'll make a motion to approve, I guess.
Commissioner Simmons moves for the resolution providing for the partial redemption of the temporary refunding improvement bonds of 2018. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Jurdevig. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is item number 7, to review the amendment to 2018-1 TIF agreement. Mr. Larson.
Thank you, President Stardust. Commissioners, tonight we'd like to present an amendment to the TIF district of 2018-1. This is related to 2 buildings that are being proposed for downtown Cheyenne. One is the firm, which is located between the current POW, MIA Plaza, and the Pioneer Place. Also, there's another part of this which has 2 lots to it, which is where the Berg Auto is located at this time. And this agreement was originally passed and approved by the commission, but we're asking for an amendment to change one component of it, and that is how the financing is placed for this. The original agreement had the developer holding the note for the improvements, and then as TIF revenue would become available, those funds would then be forwarded onto them, and then it would pay down the note that they have. We'd like to request it along with the developer that it would allow us to move that financing from the developer actually to the city. We would use internal funds for this, and it would allow us to provide a rate of return for those funds as well as providing a lower rate for the TIF. The advantage to that for the public is that the sooner we pay off the TIF, which a lower interest rate would allow us to do, then those funds, those tax revenues that we're using, the incremental tax revenues we're using, will then become available for the other entities such as the school district, the county, and the city as well. So that is, in essence, that's what this agreement does. It just changes who carries the financing. This is also consistent with all of our other TIF districts that we've put together in the past, and we would like to stay consistent, because as you administrate this over the next 13 years, which this one is, it's best to have consistency so that there's less errors and more efficiency within how we process. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Commissioners, you have questions for him?
So Jim, the TIF this TIF is still within the confines of the facilities that we're building, or are they more citywide?
These buildings, these are right within the TIF district. Yes, they are in the current TIF district as approved earlier.
Okay.
So it's no change to the district or the terms of the agreement.
But it will basically free up more funds for the future, is what you're saying.
Yeah, with an early payoff and a lower interest rate. And I'm not talking like you will go from a 13 to an 8-year. We're talking like a 13 that might go to a 12 and maybe an 11. And again, if we have the other appreciated value in that area, this will pay off even faster.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve item number 7, to review the amendment to the 2018-1 TIF agreement. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 8, is to review the amendments to 2017-1 TIF agreement. Mr. Larson.
Thank you, President Dardis and Commissioners. I'd like to first start off with this one, that the request for this is going to be a little different than what is in the packet and what we've discussed even earlier today. What I'd like to do is present the information, stand for questions, and then request the Commission consider tabling it to the next City Commission. We've had information that's come to view through the day that makes this a better item, should we, as we have an ability to gather some additional information that would help to either support the case for approval or denial. We'll go with both directions. I don't want to assume that it's just to get approval. Currently, there is an agreement in place for the 2017-1. This is the Lights on 32. It's a phenomenal development in the southern part of our city. And it's going to have some great public amenities once it's completed. A part of it is the plaza and the multi-level parking garage, first in the city. Currently, there's a TIF to help pay for those two main items in the sum of $7.5 million for each. $7.5 for the plaza, $7.5 for the parking garage. We're already in process moving with that. There's another additional $3 million that's a part of it, and this is in relationship to the Northern Lights component. It's a large facility that's being constructed today. As you drive by on Cheyenne, you would see it, and it would, it shows a nice structure, a nice addition. There's another $3 million component within there that this TIF, which is a 25-year TIF, is supporting. The developer is asking for the Commission to consider this amendment, which is for $900,000. With this TIF amendment, they would move forward with constructing an $8 million multi-use facility just north of the existing Northern Lights and then pushed up against Cheyenne Street, or on the east side of the lot. The development would also provide for, so the $900,000, what are they looking for? At a request of President Dardis, we did seek more detailed accounting for that. For the public parking stalls, approximately $264,000, and then there's about another $932,000 for other public amenities, such as widening the boardwalk, better accessibility within the site. And so and the total cost there is basically 1.2 million. So the amount of the development, what they're identifying as public developments does exceed the 900,000, but we're going on just the max amount that the TIF would support with today's numbers. So that's where the difference is. They still have to put another 300,000 towards these type of development or improvements. As we reviewed this earlier today with our planner, we believe that it would be best that we have the opportunity to, in better detail, review the site. We also want to make sure that code compliance is there and that this is a very viable project. At this time, we just are not agreeing that that's where we should go. And it is a viable project, it's a great project, but we also need to make sure our staff have the opportunity to review it properly. So that's why we're asking for a consideration of tabling it to the next meeting. I'd be glad to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Larson with regard to this one?
I would just make the comment, I mean, just on a personal perspective, I'm fundamentally opposed to a 25-year TIF and would not vote to add more onto it. So I can't imagine how the circumstances that I would do that. So just, that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Anyone else?
I'm just curious.
Awesome.
This is another building that would be to the north of what's being built right now and directly east of the existing fire station?
That is correct.
It's going to add 60 parking lots?
Yes, there would be parking underneath the structure of about 85, and this is preliminary, so I don't want to be held to it. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but this is what we're being told, and that it would be 85 underneath, which would serve the requirements for the building, and then these 60 additional would be for the general public and not required to meet parking requirements. But those are some components we would like to confirm.
I think it's very wise that you're going to table this and get some more information for us, because I think right now it'd probably be a little difficult. We don't have a lot of information on it. So thank you for making that suggestion.
I would also like to say that should after this meeting even something else comes to mind, some additional information you would like to have us bring forward, please let us know. We'd be glad to gather it and bring it to you.
Well, like you said, Mr. Larson, you have a general knowledge as to how many parking spots. That obviously is item number one. The other term in the contract reads amenities, which there's no description of what amenities might possibly mean. And so I have a concern about that. And along with Commissioner Jurdovic's, the amendment to also to have a 25-year term on it, I would ask that you visit with them about that too.
We will do that.
Do you need a motion to table it?
Yes.
I'll make the motion to table.
Commissioner Olson moves to table item number 8, review the amendments to the 2017-1 TIF agreement. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstad seconds. Been moved and seconded to table item number 8 to review the amendments to 2017-1 TIF agreement. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next order of business is item number 9, the spring flood update and discussion of RFQ for the 2020 flood engineering services. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Douglas and members of the Commission. I'm going to start with just a brief overview of the Cheyenne River Flood Control Project. We're all pretty familiar, especially after last year's event, on how our diversion operates and the river and what we need to do to prepare. But again, I just want to be brief and quickly go through just as a refresher. Okay. So what you see on the screen here, off to the left, is the Cheyenne River watershed. It's just a map. The blue area here is really what's contributing to the Cheyenne River. And as you can see, it starts as far northwest as the Devil's Lake area, really a part of the Devil's Lake basin. You see that river then comes through Valley City, which there is Bald Hill Dam there, as you're all familiar with, which is where a lot of the flow that we saw last fall was generated through Bald Hill Dam, and whether or not they're sending a lot of water our way or retaining it back, again, plays a major impact on us. So I wanted to show that, and then, of course, as the river starts to make its way through Lisbon, Kindred, and is eventually getting to Horace, I wanted to reiterate that there's about 4,600 CFS in that river channel. Anything beyond that is breaking out, overland flooding. So when you're south of Horace, again, down to Kindred, Lisbon, there's a lot of overland flooding that's occurring. And so really all that comes up to Horace is this 4,600 CFS. And as you can see on the right-hand side is just an overview map of our diversion channel on the west side of town. Turn this on. My cursor's not really showing up, but on the west side of town, there is the Horace diversion channel. I use this green light here. This Horace diversion channel diverts about 2,600 CFS of that 4,600 around the south side of town, connects to the West Fargo diversion channel, which is designed to convey all of that flow, that 4,600 CFS around the old part of town north of the interstate. So what that looks like here, again, just visually, 2,600 in the Horace channel, 2,000 CFS then is still in the river channel south of I-94. That's where we see the potential issue with the bank stability. If we had a slough and that river could break out, we would have some localized flood impacts. So that's why we are vigilant in maintaining the integrity of those river banks south side of I-94. And that's where we are also susceptible to things like ice jams, ice damming at our crossings on the river. At I-94, there is, of course, the river gates. They are shut, and all of that river flow, along with the other flow in the Horace diversion channel, are now 100% diverted around town. Then in the core parts of West Fargo on the north side, we are pumping any of the interior flow out. That's where springtime rain events can cause some damage, or rain at any time. It rain in the summer and the fall. We are still susceptible to internal flood issues when we get high rain events. So this graphic here, it's a little difficult to see on the screen, but what I wanted to reiterate or remind everybody is that the Horace diversion channel is obviously a smaller channel. It carries nearly half the flow as the West Fargo channel. On the inside levee on both diversion channels, we have a greater protection. That is basically where our levee mechanism is that keeps the water on the west side out. What can happen on the exterior levee is that if the water overland flooding is high enough, it actually can come over that bank. That is not an issue. It would look alarming, but by design, that is that outer bank is about a foot lower than the inside bank or levee. So just wanted to point that out again. And this is just a couple pictures. This is what the structure down in Horace looks like. So the river is coming in through here at about 4,600 CFS. And again, 2,000 is allowed to continue into the river up through town. 2,600 CFS is diverted into the Horace and West Fargo diversion channel. This is what that restriction box culvert looks like. So again, it's the size of that box culvert is what is restricting that, how much flow can come through. And then right here is where there's a weir, and again, that water is heading around town in the Horace diversion channel. And these graphics are a little difficult to see with the lights on. What we see here is the gates on the river. When they are closed, Again, this water heads back around into the West Fargo diversion channel, ultimately going around town. And what this image is showing is what that weir structure looked like. It's basically a sheet pile weir. So, and then what you see here, this structure is our north lift station, north pumping station that when all of that flow then is diverted around town, it ultimately comes to the north side of our public works facility where it is then pumped back over our levee system and into the Cheyenne River, which ultimately then drains downstream into the Red River, meeting up with the other influences of the Red River, the Maple, the lower and upper Rush Rivers. So preparations, I've got a report from Public Works, Matt and his crew on what have we been doing over the last month or so. Really, it's all of the same old things that you've heard before. We're really concerned with making sure all of the culverts are opened and cleared, and flap gates on the ends of our outlets at the rivers are cleaned and shut and working properly. We are opening up the ditches, cleaning out culverts. We're where we do have certain drains and developments that are tied to the river, we need to shut those gate valves or put Mooney ball plugs in. We have our monitoring gauges. They're supposed to be here this week and hopefully installed and calibrated by the end of the week. That is what helps us chart the height of the river profile. The reason for doing so, it helps us identify things like if there's an ice jam, we can see real time that effect. So those sensors will hopefully be installed by the end of the week. And then again, our north pumping station is operational. It's the Southeast Cass Water Resource District had a project that started last fall. That project is about complete. 2 of the pumps are operational, but I believe there is still 1 or 2 more pumps that need to be put in standby, tested, and ready for use when the melt comes, and I believe that's scheduled to happen this week. Any other operational, if there's questions on what we're doing, Matt is in the audience. He's certainly prepared to come up and answer more detailed questions as it relates to our preparation efforts on the diversion and river. So then last, wanted to have a discussion on the engineering services. Generally, after we declare an emergency, that opens up our ability or eligibility for federal funding, which one of the items that we would use to apply that funding toward is our engineering services. So we published an RFQ document, which is not opening up here. Let me pull that open onto the screen. This document was included in your packet, so I'm just going to go right to the schedule. We issued the RFQ on February 28th, the day after the mayor signed the emergency declaration. The commission confirmed that declaration at our last meeting. We published it for 2 weeks, and then submittals of qualifications were due last week on March 11th. Then a selection committee comprised of Tina, Matt, and myself reviewed all of the submittals. We had 3 submittals, and we ranked all 3 submittals according to the criteria listed in here, which was their qualifications, experience, and availability, with the intent of having a ranked list of consultants that we would start with contracting with the highest ranked consultant. However, if we do run into a situation where we do feel like we need additional services, being that this was a request for qualifications, it's qualification based, we would be able to enter into a contract with those other firms as needed. At this time, we still don't quite know exactly what a consultant is going to do for us. We don't have a scope truly laid out. This is going to certainly be situational dependent. What type of event do we have? Where are the needs? Do we end up with, for example, a breach in the levee and we need somebody to help coordinate contractors to get over? But we wanted to certainly have the consultant services on standby if and when we need to deploy them. So getting back to the ranking, I want to show you the results here, what that looks like. What you'll see are the individual scoring sheets from, again, Tina, Matt, and myself. And I will get right to the summary of the results here, where you can see that of the three submitters, Moore Engineering, Houston Engineering, and Advanced Engineering, Moore was ranked number 1, Houston number 2, and Advanced number 3. And so, in conclusion, what I am asking of the commission tonight is basically to authorize the city engineer and the city administrator to negotiate contracts with Moore Engineering. Again, they were the highest ranked consultant. We would certainly take back, once we develop a scope and a fee with Moore Engineering, we would take back the final contract to the commission. But again, as we might end up in an emergency situation, we want to have this authority to execute a contract and use their services as needed. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Commissioner Jurdovic.
So explain to me how much of the criteria in ranking, let's take the top 2, comes from specifically knowing the Cheyenne diversion and kind of how it operates versus just being a engineering firm that specializes in floods and water management and so forth?
Great question. So when I go to the part of the RFQ that was published to everybody, when I say everybody, published out to the contracting industry, 35% was based on qualifications, and another 35% based on experience. So I'd say that
Experience of what, though? I mean,
so as
take Houston,
right.
Full disclosure, I'm personal friends with one of their owners who lives in West Fargo. You know that.
Yep.
I know they do a tremendous amount of water engineering, flood work, and so forth. So I'm just curious. Here's the thing. I ran a consulting company for many years. I filled out many RFPs and RFQs that were a waste of my time because the vendor was already selected. And I remember we did this a year ago, and we picked Moore. And I had the feeling at that time it was picked because they had a lot of knowledge through all of the years they've worked with the city and with the Cheyenne diversion. Why are we asking these firms to go through these hoops if that's who we're going to pick?
Quite honestly, it's part of the FEMA requirement to get their federal funding. I mean, so
Okay.
I can honestly tell you that.
No, I
Year in, year out.
appreciate the blunt answer. I guess that
because
makes sense.
I've been challenged before on,
Yeah.
why can't we open this up to everybody else? Well, quite honestly, if I had my way, in fact, before I advertised an RFQ this year, I worked with Pierre to do some research on whether or not the MSA we have in place with Moore would suffice for FEMA in terms of being able to fund their services for this type of work, or would we actually have to go through an RFQ? And ultimately, the answer was you have to go through an RFQ. And yes, I don't see a day unless there's a significant turnover, or maybe
And
they
please
are.
don't take my question to say that I'm thinking we're picking the wrong firm. I'm not
Right.
making a call on that.
Sure. No.
I just can feel for the other firms that are responding. If the experience specifically because Moore's worked in the Cheyenne diversion is what gets them to the top of the list every year, those firms are never going to be number 1 unless Moore didn't respond. And I just don't like wasting people's time. But
I certainly
I
agree,
understand the
Commissioner.
FEMA requirement piece of it. I just
Absolutely. And I absolutely agree. And, that's where I try to keep this, the requirements of this RFQ relatively simplified so that other responders are not putting in a lot of time and resources. Although, one thing that is a little different is that, we do have the right to contract for some other needs. And so if it got to a point of some specialized service that we felt that either Moore Engineering didn't have the availability or maybe weren't quite qualified for,
Fair enough.
that's where we do have that right to now come back and say to the consultant rank number 2, hey, are you available? There's an interesting situation right now with the coronavirus of who knows if more engineering were to be affected by this and unavailable, that is still 30% of this ranking system. So we would seriously have to consider going to the number 2 firm.
Commissioner Simmons, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question, and kind of in reference to what Commissioner Jurgovic is saying, but a little bit. So, and I have no idea about Houston or whatever. I'll say it first, and then you can answer the question. I do like the fact that Moore, and I know they're tagged up with another firm, are doing the FM diversion. I think that's a huge asset for us to use them for that reason alone, because I think they have already a lot of contacts within FEMA and have that we don't have. Now, I don't know.
And Houston are 2 firms.
More in Houston are doing so. Okay, so we're in the same boat. I didn't know if it was all Teague or if it was Houston that was involved with it, but
So again, all great points, and I do feel that Houston, and so is Advanced. There's other firms that are certainly dealing with flood analysis, flood preparations, flood designs, flood fighting. And so, but there really is only one firm that has the local experience with where are our soft spots, where are our weaknesses, where do we need to really put attention on and focus on. And without any guidance at all, Moore Engineering has that. And we'll always have that. And so yes, again, that's where the blunt answer is, we're federally, we're required to, if we want federal funding.
Well, hopefully when we send it to those other organizations, there's a wink that goes with it so that they don't burn too much time on something that they're not.
Right. I understand completely.
Additional questions? Mr. Thorstein.
Just one. It's kind of on the topic, but a little bit off. But the general public, who should they contact if they have questions about needs for sandbags or whatever we talked about? Should it be Public Works? Should it be City Engineering? You know, they shouldn't necessarily call our consultant engineer, but should it be Public Works? I mean, as we go into this, there's going to be people who are going to have questions or concerns. You know, if the water starts getting up, high in the river or whatever, who should they call? Are we going to put that information out there?
Yeah, the information is on our website. Off the top of my head, I believe it used to be a Public Works number. I believe there's been, Melissa was working on this before she went on vacation, but there's now a new centralized number to call within the city. But yes, this information is on our website on who to call with any information. I would err on calling the engineering department with flood-related questions. If there is an operational issue or something that is urgent or a matter of concern, then certainly get a hold of Public Works, and or if it's that level of concern, the right answer might be call 911. But if there's, a lack of drainage in the street, there might be a culvert plugged, something of that nature. It's certainly called Public Works.
We just want to keep it simple so they're not trying to figure out who to call, and they don't get a response or whatever because it's the wrong place to call.
Absolutely.
Additional questions for Mr. Scott? Right? You're fine.
We're touching on the pumps to pump the water over the wall of the north end. We referred to a couple that need to be certified and tested. And my question, and I don't say this smart alecky, Scott or Dustin, what's the estimated time when those pumps will be tested and certified and run, and the time the water will come here?
Good question, Mr. Lensmeyer. So the question is, I mentioned that the North Pumping Station currently has 2 operational pumps, and the 1 or 2 reserve pumps are still being worked on. It's estimated to be done this week. There were some electrical things. I don't know if Matt has more specifics, but I don't know the specific details. But I know that they were supposed to be operational yet this week.
Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Anvig, Director of Public Works for the City of West Fargo.
Commissioners, Commission President, to answer your question to that, there was a contractor that was working on it. 2 pumps right now are operational up there. They did get them in last week. The new pumps, there are 3 new pumps that are on the way that are supposed to be here on Wednesday. If they are not here by Wednesday, the contractor is supplying, I think, 2 or 3 20-inch pumps that they will man and run in the event that we need them. So we will be covered. That we have 2 pumps right now that will fully take care of what we're working on or what we will need. And then with the cold snap coming, that will give us a little extra breathing room. But those 3 brand new pumps are supposed to be here on Wednesday and operational by the end of the week.
Thank you, sir. That answer your question, Mr. Lensmeyer? Thank you. Good question.
Maybe the other part of that question was the expected timing of when the water is going to be moving. That's a difficult one to answer at this point. We still don't know. That's going to be a lot of factors that involve that, but we're still thinking that's still a few weeks out yet.
Is that the conclusion of your report, Mr. Scott, or do you have some more?
No, that is the conclusion. So again, I'm requesting the City Commission to authorize the city engineer and the city administrator to negotiate a contract with Moore Engineering.
Got it. Commissioners, Mr. Scott is asking us for authorization for the city engineer and the city administrator to negotiate contract with Moore Engineering for an RFQ for the 2020 flood.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons, is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded. Give the city engineer and the city administrator authority to negotiate a contract with Moore Engineering for an RFQ for the 2020 flood. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Item number 10 is a review the Folkways contract for community input project for the West Fargo Public Library. Mrs. Hanson.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. As requested by the Commission last week to keep presentation brief in light of COVID-19, I asked Courtney Williams to send you notes on my agenda item, and I will touch on some of the key points for the public, and then I will take any of your questions. But before I do, because it's pertinent to the contract, I would like to announce that after discussing with the Library Board President and City Administrator the current situation with COVID-19, and having been speaking very closely throughout the day with regional library directors, we have decided to close the library beginning tomorrow until a date yet to be determined. This is really in an effort to keep our public and our staff safe and healthy. Our library workers at the WFPL are public servants through and through. So we are working to come up with new ways to facilitate online versions of our popular programs like our story times and our book clubs. So I just want to thank you for your support during this time, and hopefully we will be back open soon. So on to the agenda item. The West Fargo Public Library has embarked on a new strategic planning process to develop service goals for the next 3 years, so 2020 through 2023. And these goals will be based on the needs of the community. The purpose of the library's strategic planning process is to determine needs and goals and motivations of West Fargo residents and develop service responses that meet those needs. However, we don't know exactly what those needs are right now, and the community has really changed a lot since our last strategic plan was developed in 2015. So the city and the library are seeking approval to contract with a group called Folkways to obtain and analyze community input from West Fargo residents who are library users and non-users. This project constitutes a pilot project between the city and Folkways to determine if the city should retain Folkways for continued community input projects with other city departments. On Thursday, February 13th, the Library Board of Directors approved a payment of $6,000 towards the contract from the Library Fund. The library and the city are now seeking approval to fund the remaining $6,000 of the contract, which totals approximately $12,000 out of the general fund. Again, with relation to COVID-19, I've been in touch with Folkways founder Joe Burgum regarding the project timeline in the wake of the virus outbreak, and approval of the contract doesn't lock us into a certain timeframe or timeline, and we'll work together to determine when the contract should begin. And with that, I am here to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Questions of the commissioners? Nothing.
I would make a motion to approve.
I think it's a good idea.
It's
very good.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jurdovic moves to approve the bulk waste contract. Mr. Simmons, second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Hanson.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Mayor, can I say just real quick?
Yes,
For the
please.
record, thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
For the record, for our public audits, we did look over Chris's information and all that, so it's not like we're just sitting up here not asking questions and saying yes. I just wanted to make that comment, if that's okay.
Good point, and I also met with Folkways when they were in, and we had a nice discussion, so absolutely. This was vetted. Next order of business. Item number 11 is the review, the proposed TIF for redevelopment project at 409 Cheyenne Street. Mr. Soberg, Mr. Larson, Mrs. Fisk.
Thank you again, Your Honor.
Tag team in this one, huh?
In an effort to sort of work holistically on a project of this magnitude, that's why you have all three of us. We're both filling in for an absent economic development director, but finding that the team works really well together on addressing an application of this magnitude. The applicant here is proposing a 15-year tax increment finance district for redevelopment of the existing Bell Bank facility in downtown West Fargo. And it feels good to say downtown West Fargo. I think there's a lot of excitement down there, and this would increase that excitement for sure. The new building would include underground parking, 1 floor of retail space, 3 floors of parking, and 2 floors of residential apartments. And on top of that, 2 floors of residential condominiums. This would increase the true and full value of the property to a approximate $17.7 million. Currently on site is a 9,500 square foot owner-occupied bank with approximately 31 improved surface parking spaces. I'd say there is no identified blight or slum. The building is in fine shape. It would continue to operate in that fashion for a number of years. I think the surface parking is probably the most amount of area that takes up a lot of space for potential development downtown that could be an increase in our tax revenue. The building itself is in good shape, but they do need that parking for that building. Again, to talk a little bit more about the project, the proposal would provide a total of 321 public parking spaces in a parking garage. That would be housed on floors 2 through 4. The first floor would be a dramatic increase in retail to the downtown. Bell Bank has committed to taking a large amount of that space, so they would not be gone from downtown. They would come right back after the project would be completed. They propose to reserve floor 2 for that the tenants of that retail space from the hours of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, open to the public for all other hours. Floors 3 and 4 would be open to the public at all times, providing approximately 203 just from my calculation. I think it's a little bit more as you look at the design a little bit. I think that's important to note. As we look at parking downtown, this would open up opportunity for development downtown without the requirement of parking. If you develop downtown Fargo, you don't have to provide parking for the development that you're proposing. That's a major impediment to development in a lot of cases because they have to both not only have space for the building, but space for the parking lot, taking up a lot of land. When we look at some properties that develop and you look at the amount of land used for parking, it takes a lot of that taxable value out of the finite amount of land that we have within the city of West Fargo that's flood protected. And downtown, with the investments that we've had down there, it just makes fiscal sense to develop in this manner. We don't have to provide increased infrastructure. You're able to use the infrastructure that's already there. Of course, we have some needs downtown, but adding additional users and additional tax value downtown helps distribute that burden for improvements of the infrastructure. Looking at the project eligibility for development within the urban renewal plan, the area here I lay out in the staff report 11 items to point to which this project would achieve. Certainly strengthening the economic well-being and development of a renewal area here. This is within our urban renewal plan, and a project like this is really the, I think, gold star for a lot of those items. As it refers to West Fargo 2.0, which is really the center focus for how we would redo the urban renewal plan and how we look at development in the future, I think I want to highlight specifically the grow business and bring in new investment big idea. Proposed project increasing that retail space from 9,500 square feet to almost 25,000 square feet is going to be a tremendous boon to the area. And the proposed project providing that additional parking to really change the view of what we have downtown. Currently, downtown, we push for this type of development, but we really don't have anything to back it up. And years ago, when we had this Cheyenne Overlay District and Matt was brought to bring in a lot of projects downtown, we always kind of talked about the need at some point in the future for a public parking garage. If we were indeed going to have development occur incrementally without big projects in big TIF districts, being able to have somebody buy a lot and not have to redevelop that lot with no parking or looking for parking has been a struggle. Anybody that leases retail space knows that they also have to have parking for that. So that is a big benefit to this project. So my job is to highlight what is good for the project, and I'm going to pass it on to Jim to talk about the specifics of the cost of this project, and then let Tina come in to kind of back it up. I just want to highlight, the last note in our staff report here, the Economic Development Advisory Committee's recommendation does include a condition that if this were to be approved, that they would ask that we look at our parking requirements downtown. And again, there's a process to this. This is over 5 years, so it requires us to, if tonight, whatever is made a motion, we would have to send a certified letter to the president of the school district and the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. That gives them a 30-day time limit for us to meet with them. We're going to continue that path that has already started with the City of West Fargo and those boards to meet with potentially 2 commissioners from each of the 3 bodies to kind of discuss the project. And in that time frame, within that time in the 30 days, if approved or if there's things that you want to add to it, we would work on an agreement. So tonight we're not asking for approval of an agreement. Final approval we would come back to at a later date. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Jim, and I'll be available for after for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Soberg. Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Tim. President Dardis, Commissioners, I'm going to see if I can get this to... I'd like to bring up the document that's on the screen. After reviewing it with a few others, there's some clarifications I'd like to make on it. To start with here. So financial. So right now, the taxable value for this parcel is about $1.2639 million. Once the developments are made, we estimate the valuation to go up to $18.5 million, which provides a net additional taxable income of $230,000. Based on that, that would allow us to support, let me bring this up here. If you look at this number right over here, again, it's small, so let me see if I can make it a little bit easier to read. That's a number of $2,362,359. That's what we project this project could pay for, costs it could cover. And that's based on going out and funding debt on this and having there would be a bond in 4%. So that's what it can cover at a 4% rate, is improvements of about $2.36 million. What I'd like to correct is that if you take a look at these headers that I have used, they're very misleading, and I apologize for that. What this schedule is about is to take a look at what's the investment into the project, what's the cost invested in. But it makes it look like that the TIF cost is what's being invested in. So this TIF cost represents the developer's investment onto the site. It's the cost of the building, the underground parking, and other amenities. It is not the cost that the TIF will cover. Over here on this column, the developer would be paying, and this is one of the floors that is open to the public. They'd be paying 2.448 million approximately. And then over here is another 2.448 million and another 2.448. So that's the cost per floor. The reason we pulled them over here is because once these are constructed, they would be condoed and owned by the city, which means there'd be no taxable value. So we're not allowing the values of these improvements to be used towards the TIF because they would not increase the taxable valuation. But it does give the appearance that we're asking for that type of investment by the TIF, and that's not correct. What we are asking is the TIF to support only 2.362 million of this project, approximately one floor, not an exact one-to-one. But the other part of this project, if this was to move forward, is so that the cost of these two floors would be 4.896 million. The TIF would only cover about 2.36 million, leaving a cost for the city to fund from another source. For example, sales tax capital would be 2.5 million, and this would allow us to get the 3 floors of public parking available in this project to support the situations that Tim was able to explain. The term of the TIF that's being proposed and requested is 15 years, and so that's the term, and those are how the numbers are flowing. But I won't. But they are. It does get to be rather confusing. So I'd be glad to answer questions regarding the financial model.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one right away on the top, Jim, that 4% for the bond. That's very high, is it not?
Well, it wasn't 3 weeks ago, but it is today.
Well, considering we're
And
down
it
to
could be
zero,
lowered come tomorrow.
2.5, so I'm assuming that's gonna,
I'd love to see that down. Let's just say it goes to 3%. If that came down to 3%, then this number would increase, so the TIF could support more of the cost of the construction and less of the city direct money.
okay. Yeah.
So if we ask you the question today, how you would fund that other $2.5 million, how would you do it?
I would use money that's come through, either that's sitting in the Economic Development Fund, or I'd suggest that we would use some of the capital improvement funding. But I probably would lean closer to the economic development funding, because I think that's what this is. It's an economic development project to spur growth for other development downtown. There is adequate funding at this time in our projections.
So has the developer visited with any of the other entities, the school district or the county, with regard to the term? I know that Cass County, there's a number of those commissioners that do not like a 15-year term either, prefer a much shorter term.
President Dardis, I can respond to that. Jim and I were both at this meeting in attendance. West Fargo Events had a meeting and invited us. They had the county administrator there, as well as Levi Bachmeyer from the school system and Mark Lemmer, who's acting and helping Levi. At that meeting, this was discussed. And it was said that, yes, there might be a county commissioner that doesn't really like the term, but overall, the excitement was that if we could you've got a developer that's willing to pay for a floor of public parking, we pay for a floor of public parking, and then a TIF district that supports a third floor of public parking, that's a win-win for the entire downtown area to get 300 spots, and they're all public parking. So the school said, come over, meet with us. We're excited to talk about it. We don't see an issue because it's not creating more students. The other exciting part was that if you think about it, as we expand this type of parking, it takes all the other parking lots and makes them something that have a lot more value, because as we change our ordinances and don't require such huge parking lots, we can refurbish and build on some of the huge lots that we have right now as time goes forward. So actually we're increasing our tax base by allowing this project to go through. And the entities that are now receiving taxes for the Bell Bank building, it's not going to change. They're still going to get that. They just aren't going to get the difference until the TIF district is paid off.
Would you repeat for the public the way that the 3 floors are?
Sure.
I think that's important. And
Yes. The exciting part about this project, which is very unusual, is that it's a developer, city, and TIF district-driven project. The only thing the TIF district is there to finance is 1 floor of public parking. And then knowing we need more parking, we as staff said, we would like to see if the commission would agree to pay for another floor of public parking. And then the developer said, fine, I'll take on the 3rd floor of public parking. Because they have underground parking for their residents that live above, so they don't need that parking necessarily, but they know that if the downtown district is going to strive and get stronger, we need to have parking down there that will accommodate people. And so it's really kind of a really nice mix, because you've got school, city, county, developer, everyone working together to create this downtown. So it seemed like a really good fit.
thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Additional questions for Mr. Larson or Mrs. Fisk? I'll be all right.
I guess I would,
Commissioner Trujillo.
there's a ton of things about this general concept I really like. The piece I don't like is the $2.5 million above and beyond the TIF district, which is also public dollars. I mean, it's the taxes that are being paid on that for the next 15 years. You know, is this still a successful project if it involved only 2 floors of above ground parking? I mean, that's still 200 spots of parking, but it would save the taxpayers of West Fargo $2.5 million, still provide a lot of additional parking down there. And, you know, is that still a viable project, I guess would be the question.
I can't say, excuse me, thank you, Commissioner Jervig. I can't say for sure what that does or doesn't do to the project as a whole, but the impact that that 3rd floor of parking has for the downtown area is significant, especially as we're looking at other things possibly moving down there. And the traffic, we want people down there, we need parking. We've already got parking issues downtown. And I think the city needs to, at some point, if we're saying we want to develop from Main Avenue to 7th and have that be a real thing, we've got to be willing to invest a little money to show the people that we will provide you parking. We now come, because retail places, they want parking. If we want them to come, we have to provide something. And to have a developer step up and say, I will put $2.5 million in for public parking to help this have more value is a good thing. And for the city to invest, cities invest in parking all the time. It's just not something we're used to.
Well, which we would still be doing if it was 2 floors. We'd still be investing. I would argue that the financing from the TIF district is a city investment.
It's a city, school, county, park.
Yes, fair
Yeah,
enough.
because if they all agree, I mean, we carry the smallest weight in the whole pile of people, but I understand what you're saying. I just, in our excitement on this is because of the fact that we're trying to create parking so that people can come and we can redevelop some of those spots that normally would have to be parking lots and create more buildings and more value. But I totally understand what you're saying. And
I think the other point, though, is, you know, we have to be, when we think of the economic sales tax, which would be the mechanism that would pay for that.
Yep.
You know, there's a doubling fact there, because tenants in this building could also apply for the enterprise grant. And, you know, there's a part of me that thinks in one building in town, we would be investing a huge percentage of those dollars in order to make that happen. It's a big commitment. I mean, it's $5 million of city contribution and city county schools contribution for an $18 million taxable value building. Right. And that's getting close to being a third of the taxable value of that building long term. That seems it's at the top limit of things.
Our historically in a downtown like this, and I believe Tim touched on it too, it's hard to get people interested in investing down there because you have all this infrastructure, you have all this stuff there, and you've got to clean it up, get rid of it, and then start all over building. And I believe if Cheyenne Plaza and Pioneer Place, those ones, the city had a significant investment in those as well, and it's proving success. So I understand your concerns. At this time, the only public assistance this project is proposing is that tax increment finance district at this time. There are no other forms of assistance under evaluation by staff. And the nice part, some of the things that Tim had wrote down was the proposed project won't displace any families. It conforms with the development plan, the city's general plan for urban development and urban renewal, as well as a comprehensive plan. It would assist in the development of the downtown, increasing both residential density as well as expanding our commercial tax base. At this time, we would recommend that the city approve the proposed TIF district with the recommendation that was brought forward by Planning and Zoning to do work on amendments to 4-450 our off-street parking and loading regulations for the downtown mixed-use district. They met on February 5th, and they recommended approval with that change noted. If you have more questions for me, I'd be happy to answer, or I can get out of the way and let Tim or Jim talk.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just make a comment. I don't disagree with what Commissioner Jurgovic is saying about the parking. It's very important. But we also have to remember when we're talking about 324 or whatever it is, 3 floors of parking, along with this, we're actually losing about 70 probably spots because Bell Bank won't have theirs. And then when we do the road diet, we won't have the ones out front. So we're not technically gaining 324 spots here. You got to remember that. That's important. That's another 100, whatever, 67, 70 probably off. Number 2 is that I go downtown every single day, and I talk to people every day, and the biggest concern they have is parking. The last thing we want to do is not have enough, especially when our comprehensive plan and everything we talk about is, higher density, letting up on the parking spots. That's going to be huge for downtown. So I think we really do need 3 floors of parking down there. And as far as I would highly recommend we use the economic development tax because that's what that's for. This is a perfect example of what we can use it for. Not only to use it for that, but our citizens voted on that a few years ago. And also, we're not going outside to build. We're actually, rebuilding downtown, which is, again, is what our county, our government, our state, Governor Bergen wants. He wants us to redevelop downtown. So I think, to me, this is exactly what we should be doing. Just my comment.
Mr. Solberg, do you know if the 321 is a net parking to Commissioner Simmons's point of the loss of street parking and the loss of the parking lot? Do you know if that's a net 321?
No, it's not. It's so minus the 31 spots that I called out in the Bell Bank parking lot. They're actually, with the road diet, we will not lose any on-street parking. There, we have the.
Won't we actually gain on-street parking?
We likely will. We're losing what we've striped out there.
Right. So we're
those,
losing.
I guess I wouldn't say it's near 70.
No, okay.
Probably a little bit less than that. So yeah, take the. I guess
Let's
you
go
can
even
take the
with 50, I
320
guess.
and subtract 31 at minimum.
Well, 50, at minimum 50
so
or
we'd
whatever,
be
40,
gaining
whatever it
290
is. It's not a net gain. That's what I'm saying.
And I, if I could, Your Honor,
Please.
just one addition, I wanted to make sure I made a comment on this because there was a news article. There is a lot to learn still about the project. Right today, we're talking about the potential of a tax increment finance district and a financial model and a concept. The project still will require to be meeting the downtown mixed-use district standard. We do have a site plan review and a building plan review that has to go through. They likely would replat it too, so there's going to be some more discussion about this. Just want to make sure you know that.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Has there been any public engagement with, the neighbors, West Funeral Home or Blessed Sacrament Church or the homeowners to the south? I mean, this has been talked about for months. The rumors were that Bell would consider moving or reducing their presence downtown. So has there been opportunity for any of those neighboring properties to see drawings or anything like that?
No, Your Honor, there has not. This is a big part of the downtown mixed-use district, having that ability to do that, and then working with that neighborhood to make sure that we have setbacks in place, buffering requirements in place. I think the unique part about this site is that the church is to the east of it, and that church is zoned R3. So there's not a lot of setbacks required of that. The setback would probably be to the south side where those lots are zoned R1. So that when they set up their site, they're probably gonna have to work with that a little bit. I don't know what else beyond that the public would want to, how we'd want to engage the public. We don't have a process for building permit review to go before the public. But, you know, I'd certainly be open to something. I expect the developer would as well.
Thank you, Mr. Soberg. Additional questions?
Well, just a comment, to
Mr.
agree
Olson?
with Commissioner Simmons on the use of the Economic Development Fund. I just got to put in perspective that two of the biggest drawers to that gather that income is Costco and Menards, and how many out-of-town people are buying there. So it isn't going to be 100% West Fargo tax, residents that are going to put money into that fund. You think of all that, what that drives, and that'll drive more. So that's what I was just going with that.
Mr. Larson is still, there he is. Mr. Larson and Mrs. Fisk, what is the balance in the Economic Development Fund? We continue to reference that we're going to use, that we should use the money out of there. What is the current balance approximately?
Please excuse me, President Dardis, as I'm kind of shooting from the hip. I didn't look at that coming, but I approximate right now sitting in fund balance about $3 million today.
And what does this fund generate on a calendar year?
Calendar year, we receive about $2.8 to $3 million a year to fund it.
Did you say 3 million?
Plus, we have other TIF districts that are returning, and so we do have some receivables from other districts in there as well.
So my point being, the reference of using these dollars, it's barely covers it. And we use this for others. But would this be spread out over the term on a yearly basis, or would it be bought down right away?
I'd like to be able to have an opportunity to review what is best for the city at that time, whether we'd rather have the cash available for others or so on.
That's fair. Okay. Commissioner Jurdovic?
Are there any other commitments that come out of that fund? I mean, we talked about what comes into it in a year. What other commitments go out of it in a year?
Right now, there's limited commitments. There is one TIF payment that comes, or not a TIF, but there's one valuation payment that comes out of it. I think it's around $200,000. Plus, depending on whether the commission was to approve another round of enterprise grants, that's at $600,000. We're already funded for the current $600,000. Right now, we've approved one application for one, so there's still substantial funding remaining in the original appropriation. And then also, we did make a commitment on the economic development, the $400,000. We've paid $100 of that, so we have $300 of that to pay.
Fueling the future.
Forward. Fueling the future, yes. So I would like to say that we do not have substantial commitments for the new funds coming in or the fund balance.
And is it safe? Well, this is such a hypothetical, but do you think our sales tax revenue is going to go up or down in the next 12 months?
If you can tell me at what level the river is going to come in, I'll tell you that number.
Let's just say it might be
I'll be honest.
might be at risk.
What I would tell you is if I was planning for this, I would probably give you a 5% reduction minimal, just for the sake of best planning. And it wouldn't even bother me if we were to take it down to a 90 percentile only of commitment.
I mean, I just want to reiterate, I love this overall project, but I'm not there yet personally with the additional $2.5 million commitment with the current potential economic situation in our city in the coming years.
One of the comforts is because we have the sales tax as we do, and it's a 15-year commitment, the ability to fund it from the economic development, whether it's upfront or over the 15 years, I feel it's it isn't a difficult burden to the fund.
I just believe there's a lot of other things that are going to be wanting, a lot of other building projects we want to see that we also want to be able to throw some of those dollars at. So.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. Tina or Jim or whoever here, I just want to make sure I heard this right. If we approve this tonight, there's still time to, I guess, negotiate, or whatever the word you want to use with these numbers on here. We can still, this isn't set in stone. Is that correct?
Well, what we're asking you to approve tonight is to approve the recommendation to approve the 15-year TIF redevelopment project. It doesn't nail everything down, and then just direct staff to develop an agreement regarding the district, and then work with the West Fargo School District and Cass County Board of Commissioners to get their input on whether they would participate in this TIF district. All of that has to happen and come back to you again.
Okay, that was my point. It's coming
Before-
back here again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So is the purpose of acting on the TIF portion of it then this evening for the developer to help him when he goes to his bank and or the county and things that showing them that the city has made a commitment? Is that part of the process, if you will?
This part of the process, I would say, President Dardis, is to let staff know what our next steps are. If you approve for us to go forward, then what we do is we work on the agreement, we meet with the county, and we meet with the school. And I'm sure the developer comes along, but it's our job to work with the school and the county to approve this district on behalf of the city of West Fargo at that point.
Mr. Larson, were there any financial models done with less than a 15-year term?
President Dardis, I did look at some other ones, but by shortening up the term, the amount that it would fund just put the city into funding more up front. So if we were to look at a reduction there, we did already request the developer to fund the one floor, but if we were to reduce it, then we would have to probably increase the city commitment from the Economic Development Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Additional questions from the commissioners?
Just one comment. Thank you, Mayor. Just for the commissioners up here, this is not a precedent. We did this actually with Costco 15-year, and we've done it, many times. So as far as I realize the situation we're in today, as far as the COVID-19 and the coronavirus, but I think it's our job as leaders to look to the future, not just 1 or 2 years. And I think we can spread this out over 15 years. Obviously, Jim, I think you're agreeing we can do it very well. So if there are no other questions, I would make a motion that we approve and move this forward.
Is that motion specific to the TIF or also the incentive, the $2.5 million?
According to the recommendations of the EDC, they're
So it's the whole proposal.
right. But again, it does, reminding you, it does come back to us again.
Is there a second? Mr. Soberg, comments, please.
Procedurally okay?
Yes, sir.
I did want to just highlight that the EDAC was not specifically giving a recommendation on the investment. They thought it was a great idea, but they left that to the commission to make that decision. So if there was a way that you wanted to do things separately, it's probably not out of the realm of possibility, I assume, Tina. Yeah, so the EDAC was essentially just the incentive, that's all they were talking about.
Yes, their recommendation was to approve a 15-year TIF for the redevelopment project, have staff work on the agreement, and then meet with the other two districts, and then come back to the city commission.
So if you wanted to separate it out as a separate discussion.
My original motion still stands. I think it's.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded. And I don't know the language.
But the motion on the table is with the $2.5 million.
I'm
With
sorry.
the 2.5.
I just want to make sure that,
Okay.
because that makes a difference in how I'll vote on
Going
it.
to the other two entities and the $2.5 million that would be. Is there any further discussion? Being none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next order of business is to construction updates. Mr. Scott, you have anything for us?
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis, members of the commission. Yes, Tina had asked that I present on two things, or give updates on two things. One being our CIP. If you recall, last time I spoke about that, we were getting towards the end and getting everything in line so that we could hand that off to Jim and have him start putting together some financial models and incorporating this stuff. So we have gotten to that point. Jim worked over the weekend to start preparing some financial documents and information to basically put the CIP in place so that we can make any adjustments as needed for projects that are in the next 5 years. So we're really close. I think that within the next 4 weeks or so, we should be at a point where we're ready to present a final CIP document. The other item that Tina wanted me to update on was our road diet project. At this point, we are still moving forward with the DOT. As I reviewed last time, we have switched into a full reconstruction project. We are preparing a public input meeting for April 6th. The DOT is aware of that date. I believe we have sent an advertisement for the meeting out. I think our communication department's going to send over the media, or send that press release to the media tomorrow. So again, April 6th, we plan to have a public input meeting. This is a requirement of the DOT, being that we had modified the scope of the project. They did require that we hold another formal public input meeting. We were already planning to do so, but this one will involve the DOT in their process. So with that, I guess, one thing I do want to make a point of, I was made aware today that the Minnesota Department of Transportation suspended all public meetings for the time being, which can have a consequence in terms of getting certain things done in time to stay grant eligible. If the DOT were to do something similar and we have to delay this public meeting, depending on how long it's delayed, could have a consequence or a rippling effect of our schedule. And as I mentioned last time, we have to bid the project this year to maintain eligibility. So I would imagine that the DOT and the federal government will work with us if, due to the coronavirus, we experience delays, but I can't answer that with any certainty. All I can tell you is that in Minnesota, they have suspended all public meetings.
They have been doing, I've seen some things coming across line where there's of a necessity like this, and they're doing virtual reality. They're doing virtual presentations.
Sure.
Advertising it to the public and then, doing it in that manner. There's a lot of that going on right now. Commissioner Olson.
April 6th is a city commissioner meeting, so is that going to be a conflict with having a public input meeting the same night we're having this?
Good question. I should have clarified a little more detail. For one, our public meeting is planned from 4 to 6 p.m. So the majority of it will take place before the city commission meeting, but the city commission meeting will start before the conclusion of the public input meeting. We did the exact same thing with our 9th Street corridor study about a month or two ago, where the open meeting was from 4 to 6, but we did start the commission meeting at 5:30, of course. So we felt that it actually worked pretty well. There was some of those that were coming to the city commission meeting that by chance didn't know about that particular meeting, and were able to take a look at the documents and make some comments. So.
Simmons?
Thank you. Dustin, obviously, that's going to depend a great deal on what happens in the next week or so here as far as even having public meetings and how we're going to operate that, right? I mean,
absolutely.
If we say we're not going to have one, we're not having one. If the commission decides that, we'll have to work that out I know actually, Tina, for the, I mean, you have a plan in place, correct? If we get to that position where we'll have to have virtual meetings or whatever, is James working on a way to do that?
Yes, James is currently working on a way to make that a possibility. He is actually filming the meeting tonight, so he can't be here, but yes, he is working on that, and I will keep you all posted.
So Dustin, that, I suppose, yeah, that will make a lot of difference how we do it, right?
Absolutely, yep, and those are details I don't know at
We
this
don't
point
know,
exactly how
correct.
we'll conduct it. And again, it could come up that the DOT mandates that we suspend all public meetings, at least projects that they're involved with. So I would hope that we can work with IT and get to call it a social distant type public meeting. But in the effort of maintaining our funding eligibility, we're going to do what we can to have, at least meet the DOT's requirements on a public meeting. Naturally, as we continue to progress along and into the summer, I'd be surprised if we plan another public engagement of some sort.
Anything else for Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
City Administrator's Report, Mrs. Fisk.
Okay, I will try and be brief, I promise. The only major updates I have right now are mainly on the COVID-19, but the first thing I want to tell you is the April Planning Commission meeting that is set for April 7th at 5, okay. The April Planning Commission meeting that was set for April 7th at 5:30 is being moved because of the Board of Equalization. What date is it moved to?
It was going to be on the 14th,
Now it's on the 17th? Oh, okay. So we will send out notice, but the planning and zoning will be moved up because equalization will take place the second Tuesday in April. And so we'll be sending out a notification on that as well, and I believe Nick Lee sent out information to you on how they're progressing, and the equalization report should be available soon. The other thing I wanted to address was with the COVID-19. We had another meeting today to address protocols that we have in place, and at that time, we made the decision that we're going to move to a level 2 off the level 1. The reason for level 2 is that the schools have closed. We have national emergencies, state and local emergencies declared. So even though we don't have any cases centrally located in our area, we feel that it's time to just make sure that we're being proactive, and so we're going to set ourselves at level 2, which doesn't have a lot of stunning changes. It just heightened awareness on travel, restrictions on travel, and how we manage employees that have been traveling outside of the immediate area. One of the questions I had from staff today was, well, if I drove my car up to Canada and went fishing and came back, I'm out of the country. I was like, well, no, this is more of a common sense thing. If you were in your car and you went somewhere and you weren't around mass crowds of people and you came back, you're fine. If you got on a plane and flew somewhere into an active area and came back, then we need to talk. So we're kind of trying to help staff step through some of the complexities that this all involves. The Park District has closed their indoor facilities and canceled all their events. I attended one of their meetings today and they discussed that. As Carissa said, the West Fargo Public Library will be closed starting tomorrow. The fire department has closed all of its buildings to the public, also effective today. It's more of a safety measure for both fire and police as well, because they get put into enough difficult situations. Working off-site, we're working with certain staff. There's some staff that need to work off-site based on vacations they've taken or different individual circumstances they have. So IT's been working with them, trying to get them the equipment that they need to be able to be at home and be comfortable while we move forward in all of these types of things. One thing that I think is important, since we did have a discussion when we had our emergency meeting the other evening, we have changed level 3 because I know Commissioner Jaravig, you had brought up that you felt 25 was quite high. And in discussions, we were trying to quantify what is the right number. And we were discussing that for every one person, there's probably two more. And so at this time, John is redrafting everything for us, but we're looking at setting level 3 to 8. If there's 8 people in the metro area, then we start doing more in-depth quarantine, video meetings. It just gets a lot more real on that. So I will keep all of you posted as soon as these protocols that John has updated, I haven't had a chance to review them. I will shoot them out. I will shoot them out to staff. We've been communicating back and forth with staff, trying to keep their questions answered. So what questions do you have for me?
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. Tina, what about the internet? What do we have on our website? And I kind of looked at it the other day and I didn't see like a whole lot. Are we up in front? Is it on there now where it's up front and bold and what?
Ellen from our communications department actually came into me today and she's working on setting up a page on our website that has all of our protocols, the things that are going on, the closures. She could probably give you more information on that if you wanted me to ask her, but I do know it's being prepared. And then
Yeah,
we also have
I'd rather have it on internet, on our website, so people have easy access to it and they can see it the minute it pops up.
That is live right now and it is being updated as more information becomes available.
Very good, thank you.
And we'll have an intranet site for employees so that if they want to check and see what's going on, if they haven't, we email everything to them, but still there'll be a spot for them to hold all those things.
So one other question, I'll be done, Mayor. So if an employee, say for example, flies, they go to Arizona, okay? Mm-hmm. And then they come back. As of today, our policy, are they allowed to come back to work or do they stay home? And let's use any, but I know Arizona, Florida, California, those are hot spots. So.
It's being treated right now on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
If you went to, let's say, Arizona, and you were just, you went down there, you were just in close proximity with your family, you didn't go to huge outdoor events, those types of things, when you come back, you have to meet with or talk with your director, and they help you determine if you've been subjected. Now, the higher level we get, anybody on a plane starts to pose an issue. I think more of if someone gets in a car and drives 2,000 miles to go spend time with family in a quiet area and drives back, that's not a big deal. It's more just using logic and common sense.
Just common sense, I was going to say. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
That's
Additional questions for Mrs. Fish?
Just
Commissioner Olson.
for Commissioner Simmons, on the website, I saw today that the garbage pickup's going to be done just a little differently too. Certain kinds of items are not going to be picked up unless Matt wants to hit that just a little bit.
That is, yep, that's true. I don't know if Matt, if you want to talk about it, okay, thank you.
Commissioners, Commissioner President, I met with sanitation this morning. They definitely had some concerns about the extra, not their normal garbage bags for pickup, it's that extra bags that are laying there, and they say a lot of the times it's loose and not bagged. And with the concerns of them picking that up and having that maybe breathing in and stuff like that, I made the determination to not pick that up unless it is bagged and tied. We will still pick it up as long as those items are bagged in a normal garbage bag. So there's that level of protection for our guys that are out there picking it up. So we're not changing of what we're picking up, we're just changing how we're picking up, just to try and make it so it's a little bit more safe for those guys in the follow truck to pick that up.
So if they put out something that's in a cardboard box, you're not going to pick up that?
We probably would not, just for the fact they could do that, but if they could fit that cardboard box in there. Larger items, mattresses were brought up for one, couches, stuff like that. For those items, if we can use either like a tool cat with a grapple, or we actually have the grapple truck that we're normally picking up tree branches with, if we can grab those and still be able to dump those, we're trying to minimize the exposure that our employees have.
Good. thank you.
Commissioner Simmons.
So, Matt, how are you notifying our citizens then? How are you letting them know?
Right now, we just have it out on the media press release and stuff like that, so we're gonna try and get it out through that and maybe.
I mean, I guess I haven't even seen that.
Yeah,
press release
just a
come
little
through.
bit more in the media to trying to get that out. Yeah, we'll have to see about, I don't know if there's a way to do, Ellie can take it.
Sorry, that was shared via press release with all of the media. We have our big media group, and then it was also shared on our social media channels, and it is on that site that I was just talking about. So
Thank you.
we did that early this morning.
Okay. You get that?
Anything else for Mr. Envig? All right, thank you. Any correspondence, Mrs. Fisk? Okay, I've been attending a number of meetings with regard to the virus also. Today, the proclamation at Cass County Commission, but also this morning, Sanford hosted, along with Essentia, all the superintendents, all the mayors, and a lot of healthcare professionals. We've had a number of meetings on the virus and the capabilities of what the healthcare facilities have. Also, the elderly housing representatives, the CEOs were there as to how they'll deal with their visitation. They basically have locked down. There'll be another briefing tomorrow that the mayors are involved in. And then Wednesday, there is another press conference that'll be coming forth that, and we're going to try and do that at least once to twice a week. And that again will be conducted by the healthcare professionals, not politicians. We are asked to attend all of them, but that's forthcoming. The one Wednesday is going to be at Fargo City Hall. And so that's going to be doing. While we were here late this afternoon, Canada closed its borders, except with the United States. You can only fly into Canada now in 5 cities. So that's, there's another country that's making some serious recommendations to how they're going to administer this. As we started the meeting this evening, Mr. Shockley showed me that Governor Walz was at that time in a press conference, and he's asking for bars and restaurants and all of those types of things to consider closing. Or did he mandate it? I don't know that, John. Okay, so this thing that we're dealing with right now, the idea that the department heads and these fellow commissioners here of how we're keeping abreast of this and how we're going to deal with this in our community, I feel that we're prepared from that elements, from the logistics and operational side of things. It's just what comes into our community. I'm totally confident that these folks have put in place great protocols that will protect our citizens to the best that we can, given the nature of the virus. So I'm proud of all of you, that what you've been doing and your engagement in this tough issue. But there's a lot of things that are going to continue to transpire in our community in the forthcoming days. Make no mistake about it. As of 8 o'clock this morning, there were now 54 confirmed cases in Minnesota. And because of that short distance and the amount of times that North Dakotans spend in Minnesota for all kinds of reasons, it's a matter of time. It isn't when we're going to, it is when we're going to get it is, and it is that it's not going to happen. So let's stay diligent, and all the ideas of the hand washing and the sanitizers and the distance. Today at the county commission meeting, it was very interesting. The state's attorney was not at the party at the platform. He had a chair sitting down there. Heather Warden, the secretary of the commission, was not at the platform. She was down there at an independent desk. There was over 6 feet in between each of the commissioners at the county commission meeting today. They're taking that extremely serious. They're trying to live by example that, I'm sorry?
I just moved a little bit farther away from Simmons, that's all.
But to display that 6 foot personal space They did it. And then Commissioner Pollock called them all out because there wasn't one bottle of sanitizer in the whole room, and there was about 60 people in the room. So, anyway, so positive, but yet a failure that they didn't have their sanitizer. So again, to the public, I feel totally confident that my fellow commissioners here are going to continue to work with the great staff that we have within the community. And we will do all that is in our power to try and safeguard our employees as well as our citizens. I've neglected to mention that the school district superintendents are also very engaged in all these meetings. And at some point in time, it won't be only the healthcare professionals that will be given direction on this. There'll be more things forthcoming. With regard to the public school systems and their closures, how they're going to continue to try and handle feeding some of the at-risk children. I know that Fargo has announced theirs. They've got 5 schools and you can drive up. The children have to be present to take the meal. Adults can't do it alone. And so there's all kinds of things that West Fargo's working on too. So with that said, Commissioner Simmons.
Make a motion to dismiss.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Olson.
I have some information from our senior group that I'd like to share with the commission. It won't take
Please.
My name's Frank Lensmeyer, and I represent the West Fargo Area Community Program. It's a group of 60-plus seniors. We have about 150 members in our organization right now. Late last week, we started talking about some of these problems you've just been talking about. We've been doing some more protocol with our volunteers on hand washing and things at our meal sites. And over the weekend, some of us discussed with a couple of the nurses that are part of our program, and we put it on our agenda to look at, as you know, we are planning our 4th year of our extravaganza. Where we get about, last year we had about 260 some people there. Great thing that we promote medical problems and health solutions for our seniors. We also know that our senior population is probably one of the more susceptible age brackets for any potential sickness or death from this flu virus or this virus. We voted today at our monthly meeting to postpone our extravaganza 4. We were all ready to go to print this morning with our posters and things. That's been postponed. We have to yet try to negotiate relining that with the facility that we have it at. So we may lose that, but we know we had to do something. We also completely closed all activities at our senior meal site. I was called while I was on the way to our meeting from our food supplier, Valley Senior Services. There's protocols going to be coming out maybe as quickly as tomorrow. Things we're going to have to do more at our meal site to protect our senior citizens, and realizing that we are more susceptible. So I want you to know that we're taking, even private citizens, private organizations here in the city are taking those decisions that were kind of sad that we had to, because we really look forward to these interactions with our people. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lensmeyer. We have a motion on the table. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you. Anyone that would like to read the declaration, the emergency declaration, I have it up here. I'd be happy to share it with you.